Okay, so welcome to everybody who's joined us today, and particularly welcome, well, not particularly, welcome if you've been to any of our other events that we've held already this month. This is the last in a series that the City and Guilds Foundation are hosting about focusing on how the role of training can help us create more diverse and inclusive organisations. Each of our events has looked at areas where there's barriers to progression, and importantly, what we can all do about that. Today, we're focusing on some of the barriers which women face. And women have made substantial progress in business and leadership positions, but in many STEM-related fields, there's still resistance to gender diversity. And our speakers today will be examining how training is driving the inclusion of women in some of the more male-dominated industries. There will be a chance for you to ask questions, so please do put them in the Q&A, and then later on in the session, we will come back to them and get through as many as we can. And we're also encouraging people to make a pledge as well after coming to one of our events, and I'll return to how you can do that later on. As always, we've got a fantastic group of speakers, and they will be talking us through how they use coaching, mentoring, sponsorship and networking to help women increase their self-confidence and progress in their careers. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my panel now, starting with Carmen Watson. Carmen is going to chair our discussion today, and she is the chair of Pertemps. Hello, Carmen. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming.
Hello there, Sally. Thank you for the introduction. I have to say it's my absolute pleasure to be here, and I'm really, really excited to hear from the speakers. They have the hard job, not me. But just to contextualise, I am working for a national recruitment company. We employ 40,000 people at any one time. We're placing 9,000 to 12,000 into permanent jobs. So we get to see both sides of this. We understand what a pivotal role recruitment companies play in placing females into organisations and helping organisations to recruit from a diverse base. But also we get to hear what women have to say about how difficult it is to actually get into the work environment in the first place, and also once they're in that workplace, how they progress. So I'm hoping to hear from our wonderful panel today on exactly how they overcome those issues. And as I say, I've got the easy bit, just making sure that we get through it all. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Carmen. So joining Carmen, we've got Sonya Byers, who's CEO of Women in Transport. Welcome to you, Sonya. We've got Charly Young, CEO of the Girls Network. Welcome to you. And also Alexandra Evreinoff. Welcome to you. So I'll get back to you, Carmen. I'll disappear and I'll pop up right at the end to just talk to you about that pledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally. Well, Sally's right. I mean, there's been huge progress in terms of women on boards. It was interesting to note that there are 0 all-male boards now on the FTSE 100, 250 and 350. But what I'd like to explore, perhaps with Sonya first, is what are your views, Sonya, in terms of the role that you think that training plays in the advancement of women and their personal development?
Thanks, Carmen. So I'm Sonya Byers, Chief Executive for Women in Transport. So we have a network of women working in the transport industry, and we support them through networking, mentoring and training. And I think training is essential especially in male-dominated professions. In transport, we have 20% of the workforce is women, which is hugely underrepresented compared to the UK workforce, which is 47% women. And so, you know, ensuring that the women that are working in transport have the skills and the tools that they need through training, and that includes different modes, whether that's mentoring, coaching, sponsorship as well. That all encompasses training, I think, in terms of upskilling people, but also training from the other side of ensuring that the people that are recruiting, that are managing, that are looking after the welfare of these women and these workplaces also have training, and so that they are able to ensure that these male-dominated areas become inclusive areas for women to work in and attractive places for women to work and progress.
Yes, that's really interesting. Alexandra, if I come to you, is there anything that you want to add to what Sonya has said?
Absolutely. So, hi, I'm Alexandra Evreinoff. I'm Managing Director at Involve. And just very quickly, Involve is a global network and consultancy championing inclusion in business. So we work with a lot of organizations from across all industries, really. And a lot of them are actually from male-dominated sectors, such as construction or actually investment management, financial services, etc. So I would say that definitely in terms of so what Sonya just said, absolutely very important for women. But I think training needs to be looked at more holistically as well. So it's not just about putting the emphasis on women and diverse talent to be trained, but also on everyone else. So basically concepts such as being consciously inclusive in the way that you operate, for example, your recruitment process, can be incredibly powerful for recruitment teams and hiring managers. So it's really looking at how these trainings can be implemented in different ways and personalized to each team, and really make sure that they have the most impact and that they're facilitating the right discussions within those groups. So it's about that peer-to-peer level of understanding and knowledge that is really, really important and key.
Yes, and I think, you know, the one point that you make there that I think is hugely valid and often overlooked is that personalisation and bespoking that to the particular people that you're dealing with. So, no, that's really, really interesting. Charly?
Yeah, so we work with 14 to 19-year-old girls from the least advantaged communities. So we're sort of further down, earlier on in the pipeline, if you like, and focusing particularly on mentoring. So when we think about the girls we're working with, we sort of think of a triangle of things that they need to have successful futures and get on in life. We think about the knowledge that they need, knowledge about how to navigate where they are now and how to get to their futures, be it an apprenticeship or university or career. We think about confidence and giving them the self-belief to access those things. And then we think about the skills and the opportunities. So having access to opportunities, but also having the skills to make most of them. And for us, it's really important that they have all three. If one of those is missing, actually, it's no good. You can be really confident and have all of the opportunities, but if you don't have the skills and knowledge to access and make the most of them, that's problematic. And the same is true for all of them. And so I think training, mentoring, the support of networks around you are essential in all three of those. And they support each other as you build skills, as you develop under a sort of training guise, and actually you're building your confidence as well. You're likely to be exposed to more opportunities. So that's sort of how we think about it with the girls that we work with. But I think that's probably true on a broader scale as well.
Mm-hmm. How do you, to what extent do you feel that mentoring does help in that progression now? And, you know, if people on this call are interested and go, oh, that's a thought, we need to be doing that, how do they go about setting it up? Where do they start?
So what I think is really important about mentoring is that it's structured and that it's purposeful. I think you can absolutely have brilliant informal mentors throughout life, but if you want to set up mentoring as an individual for yourself or as a network, I think you need to understand what it is you're trying to achieve through the mentoring. I think you need to have real structure to it. You need to set expectations at the beginning so everybody's really clear about what to expect, how to engage, the points that you might check in, how you're going to exit that relationship. I think you both need to make a real commitment to that as well, to really make that work. And then have really clear communication between you as well, including giving feedback. For us, that's sometimes a bit harder. Teenage girls don't necessarily have the language or the confidence to be able to give feedback, although we try and find ways of doing that. But I think particularly as adults, sharing, you know, this has been really useful for me, or actually this hasn't been so useful, is helpful in building that relationship and making it as impactful as possible. I think the other thing to say is if you're looking for a mentor, again, it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve from it, what you're trying to do. But also then don't be afraid to ask somebody to be your mentor.
Charly, I think
that's on the place that people sorry.
I must apologise, I missed some of that because
no problem.
Every single Zoom call has a technical hitch, doesn't it? And
at least one.
I'm today's. I got the general gist. The importance of the mentoring and setting it up, and I think certainly you would have covered the importance of the people that are actually doing that, so that you get the right outcomes. we talk about mentoring, we talk about sponsorship. Have you covered the difference between the two? Because I think people often get a bit confused, don't they, with what is sponsorship, what is mentorship, and which one of those is the one that's going to get you to that next level. And
absolutely. Yeah. And I think for us, so when we train our mentors, we talk to them and say, actually, you are likely to be a mentor and a coach and a counsellor and a champion or sponsor for this young person. And so for them, that's a really intertwined relationship. And I think sometimes in any case it is. To my mind, mentoring is quite purposeful and specific. You're trying to achieve something, develop a skill, going through a period of transition. And generally there's some expertise and experience that's being imparted by the mentor. That's not to say the mentor doesn't learn an awful lot from the mentee as well, by the way.
I think they learn equally as much, don't they?
Absolutely. But then I think a sponsor or a champion is very much then your representative in a position of power or in a position of influence. So when you're not in the room advocating for you on your behalf. And I think often mentors do end up being sponsors and champions because they get to know you and they see how great you are and they can't help but tell other people about that. But that, to my mind, is the difference between the two.
Mm-hmm. I think you've covered that very adequately, Charly. Just a quick nod to Sonya and Alexandra to see if there is anything that they want to add to that they feel we haven't covered. No?
Just very quickly on sponsorship, in business at least, we're seeing that a lot of times leaders might be mixing up or not really differentiating between mentorship opportunities and sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And really what we're trying to do with Involve is trying to get leaders to be more purposeful in the way that they sponsor talent, because oftentimes they will be sponsoring people in their own immediate circles. And usually we're human, our own immediate circles are usually made of people who have had similar experiences to our own or with whom we share similar backgrounds. Now we're trying to break that circle, that mold, and saying, okay, that is where you need to think about diverse talent and women specifically. That is where you need to think, okay, the diversity of thought in a big project, how are you going to actually bring it to life and make sure that you're considering diverse talent for these specific opportunities? I think it's at that level when they're making like the rush decisions about who's going to get assigned what piece of work or what project. That is where they need to stop and reflect and be like, nope, okay, I'm going to think differently and consult with perhaps the team to see how we can sponsor also diverse talent and think of diverse talent for these opportunities.
You're talking about sort of the high projects and the timing of that. Just merely out of interest than anything else, what do you think about the cross-mentoring side of things? The only reason I ask you that is we've done a lot of cross-mentoring, and actually what we found is it's been quite successful to have women mentoring each other and having a lead mentor that is more or less facilitating the event. I just wondered if you thought in organisations that can accommodate that, whether that might be something that organisations could consider. Sonya, you've been quiet for a little while. Do you want to give a view on that one?
Yeah, so we see mentoring happening. So we do different types of mentoring within Women in Transport. So we have our advanced mentoring program, which actually echoes some of the things that Charly said. You know, it's very structured. It's been going now for 4 years. It's an annual program, and we have an agreement that is set up beforehand. So you know, you really set out all those expectations. So even at the later stages, I think it echoes all of those things. It has to be structured. There has to be an agreement in place. There has to be feedback going on. We've, through our lead development program, we have that peer-to-peer mentoring happening. So there are informal sessions as well as this. They've got specific coaching, and they've got training going on and a qualification that comes out of that that module, which goes over 8 months. But they're also got peer learning groups, so they're offering each other that support, and the idea is that after the program they continue to have that networking and the support and almost be your own boardroom. And then with other companies we work with, like TfL, they've got speed mentoring that happens where through the Women's Staff Network group, for example, and the internal volunteer groups, where they've got leaders through the organisation doing those speed networking questions, and sometimes they have external people coming in, and people can ask 3 or 4 questions in, say, a 15-minute speed, a bit like speed dating, and then you move around the room. And that's really effective as well. If you've got just general questions that you don't necessarily, don't necessarily want those really targeted conversations about your own personal development. It's more about awareness around a specific issue or topic, and they can be really useful. But I think there's a place, it depends it goes back to your point, Carmen, about personalization. It's about, what is right for you in a given moment, in a given time, for where you are on your trajectory.
I mean, you've obviously got a very well-structured and well-run programme. And I guess throughout that, you're being fed all the issues that women have and the barriers that they face and so on. And I'm also guessing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm also guessing you've also got a channel for those barriers to go through and be presented to the board. If you were thinking, and anybody can answer this, but if you're thinking about advising people that are on the call that may not quite have that structure in place, or one that's not as developed yet, what would your advice be in terms of hearing those issues, understanding people's lived experiences and how it is for them rather than how the organisation see it? How do you take those issues, make sure that they're in the right ears, and that things can be done to effect the change? What would be your thought on that? I'm quite open actually to whoever gives a view on that one. Alexandra, you're nodding. Shall we go with you?
Sure, absolutely. Happy to. So I would say, I mean, a lot of organizations are doing this already, but having surveys that actually focus on questions around inclusion, belonging, really, and that don't only focus on the data around diversity, but actually on how employees are really feeling on their well-being, and that is incredibly important. And especially what I would say as well, don't just focus on the quantitative data. What you want to know is the lived experiences. So qualitative data is incredibly important, and these you can also get this type of data via facilitated conversations, focus groups, individual chats. So it's really important that in an organization that managers can find a way to actually get this type of information and really encourage employees to be open about their lived experiences, so that they can then find solutions that can be personalized as well to them. So I think that is a great place to start if you don't have the support networks, like the ERGs, the employee resource groups, for example.
Yes, and I think your point, just to endorse your point in terms of the qualitative and quantitative, I think that is so right, because what's the point in putting a big tick in the box to say you've got 50% women or whatever, if actually the 50% women that you've got aren't that happy in their roles? So you make a really good point there. Charly, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, just another example of something that we're doing with the girls, but I think works within organisations as well, is the sort of reverse mentoring model. So we at the moment have some of our ambassadors who are alumni from the programme, 18, 19-year-olds, mentoring some senior women in the Metropolitan Police. And the idea is that they are sharing their experiences of what it's like to apply to organisations to work, what it's like to be in an environment, what it's like, and what their opinion is of the organisation, to try and help shape that and make it more inclusive for young women like them that might want to join the organisation, or indeed for those people that might be interacting with them. So I think that's a really cool way as well, if you've got the buy-in at the top, to have lived experience speaking right to those people that can make those changes.
You've raised another really important point there when you mention the police. We hear so many times that women enter organisations. It applies to STEM as well as the uniformed. But they say, in order for me to feel that I fit in, I have to do what I think that the men expect me to do. I have to conform. I spoke to one police constable once, and I mean, it's absolutely stuck in my mind. She did rise to a senior position, but actually felt that in order to do that, she had to go to the pub after work. She had to, you know, be in all the boys' clubs, even though she didn't want to. She had to be bored to death, you know, listening to football because it wasn't her thing. So I suppose my point is, coming back to, you know, what we're talking about, the network, the sponsorships and all the rest of it, how inclusive should they be? Should it be all women? Should men be involved so that they understand the issues that women have? And then if you overlay that with some of the you know, intersectional issues as well, how does all that play out? There's quite a few questions in one there. I'm coming back to you, Sonya. Every time you're quiet, I come back to you with the most difficult question. Away you go.
Right, so yeah, it is just a question, because we often get asked as a women's in group, and you know, obviously having women in the title, people are like, well, is it only for women? And now, so there's a space for women only interventions, and I strongly believe that. But our network is open to everyone at the point of membership to be part of the network, and male allies play an incredibly important role in what we're trying to achieve. Because it is such a male-dominated industry, it is just the fact that the people that are in the position of power of influence, for the most part in transport as it stands now, are men. And if you don't have their buy-in and their support and their ability to sponsor and advocate and learn as well, and actively listen to the barriers that women are facing and their support in helping to break those down, then you know, you can't really start to build an inclusive sector and industry. So they're a really important part of our organisation, our network, and we have a number of men on our board and within our volunteers, and also about 8% of our membership is men. Having said that, our programmes are only for women, and that is because, you know, our mission is to support the professional development of women working in transport and their progression through it. So our mentoring programme, the mentees are only women, although the mentors are both men and women. And our lead development programme is only open to women members of the organisation.
How do the men feel about that though?
So honestly, they feel like, you know, I think because you can understand that we have such a stark disparity in transport that, you know, this figure of 20% is actually some figures put it at 18%, so it's been declining over a number of years. You know, we need to do something in transport. It's recognised that it is male dominated. We've done our own research recently through our all-party parliamentary group for women in transport about gender perceptions in transport. And, you know, 93% respondents said that transport is viewed as a male-dominated profession, and 75% had experienced, think that it's more difficult as a woman than as a man to progress your career, and 70% had experienced discriminatory behaviour. So it's really shocking. And I think when you look at those sorts of stats, you can't really argue with that there needs to be a specific intervention.
No, understand. Charly, I know that in your area, you've got quite a lot of experience of this. So I'd like to hear what you've got to say, but also I wanted to just share with you, we did a survey in conjunction with another organisation, and what came out of that is 70% of Black, Asian, ethnic minority people really feel that this whole sponsorship, mentorship is so important to them. And what was interesting is that 70% was in comparison to 42% of white people thinking that they needed it. And 52% felt that they've got to leave their current jobs to get progress, as opposed to, again, only 20% white. So as you're, you know, giving your experience of this, could you just highlight for us, you know, how you feel that the difficulty of these extra barriers being interwoven can be overcome and move forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Really happy to share my view on it. So I think in terms of inclusivity and exclusion, there's a term I really like called mindful exclusion. And I think it comes to a lot of what Sonya was saying about understanding what you're trying to do and then the best way of achieving that. So in many areas, when you're a broad change, you need all the players involved. You need all genders as part of that conversation to understand the issues. For us with our mentoring, part of the thing we're trying to achieve is to provide female role models for the girls. So all of our mentors are women, because our purpose there is to show them women in successful positions. So we're doing that with a purpose, and it's sort of a mindful exclusion in that context. So that's kind of how I view that, I think. In terms of the sort of intersectionality, that's a big topic for us, in the sense that we work with those from the least advantaged communities. So we have that interlay of challenges faced because of gender and because of background. And I think the reality is there are just more obstacles and there are more challenges. And I think therefore it's really important with role models and mentors that we're working with, they are diverse in all of those ways as well. They have experience of those different challenges and barriers. And we talk about them openly, honestly, and frankly, and not in a way that victimizes or condemns a person struggling with those. I think often it's really easy, for example, to talk about women not being confident, which I think isn't always that helpful. But I think actually thinking about, well, what are the systems and structures in place, acknowledging that the barriers are there and they are real, but actually we've all got a role in getting rid of them, and it's not the people that are struggling from them that are to blame for them being there. It's not them that has to change, it's the structure around them that needs to change. So I think that's really important in looking at all elements of diversity, but particularly where there's intersectionality there. I think that's really important to be honest about that.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of it as well about you know, speaking to people in a way that that it resonates with them. You know, I think Sonya spoke earlier about, you know, all the various stages and training the people that are recruiting, which I think is an incredibly valid point, because I think particularly when you talk about STEM or some of the other male-dominated industries, we talk in male-dominated language. And, you know, before you know it, you cut off half of your women because they think, oh, I can't do that. I'm not confident enough to put my name to that. So that kind of leads me to the next point, really. You know, self-confidence amongst women, and we've all been there, we've all felt it, we've all had that imposter syndrome at some point in our lives, if we're honest. But, you know, some get over it better than others. So I want to stick with this, this point, really, around what is it that, you know, women themselves can do to improve their self-confidence, but also their own investment in their development. Because we've talked a lot about companies and what companies do. What about us? What should we be doing in order to manage our own progression? Alexandra.
So what I would say is reaching out. Don't be afraid to actually reach out and ask for the guidance and the advice if you are kind of like struggling, or if you don't feel like you're being given the opportunity to actually get some support. In terms of what we've discussed, kind of like what you've mentioned, Carmen, in terms of imposter syndrome, it's actually it has been proven that it's a lot more present or prominent amongst diverse talent and women as well. So it is definitely something that needs to be highlighted and definitely helps to I would say when we address it, helps to individuals gain more confidence in their own skills, because sometimes it's just that little push that you need as well. The one thing that we didn't really mention earlier, which I wanted to just highlight, is that the lack of representation of women in senior leadership roles is also something that really affects people's confidence. And so if you don't see yourself reflected in those director, CEO roles, then why would you stay with an organization? If you know so the opportunities for people need to be there, and if they're not there, you need to ask for them, basically, because it's really it's really important to have role models. Basically, role models are incredibly important to gain that confidence and to really they'll be sharing inspiring stories, and we really want to make sure that we highlight and feature those stories so that people can be inspired and to follow similar paths. So we have three sets of lists that we publish every year: outstanding, empowering, heroes. And this last one, the heroes, is about championing women who champion women in business. So this is really, really important, an important component of the work that we do with Involve, because we know that role models will inspire change.
Thank you. I'm a recruiter, so I would say this. I think you raise a really important point about ask, find the root in your organisation, understand what you have to, and ask for it before you apply to leave your job. Because the vast majority of women that are looking to progress, that come through our doors, are people who feel that they are not able to progress within their own organisation. And it always makes me smile when we ask the question, well, did you ask? Anyway, I'm going to leave that one there. Charly, Sonya, anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think you have to make time. You really have to invest time in yourself, and that can be really challenging when, for most women, they've got the majority of the caring responsibilities. I think especially during this past 18 months or so of COVID, and you're always focused on trying to do the best job you can do, and there are lots of other conflicting priorities, but really making time for your own self-development and to invest in building your network, to get the skills and the confidence you need. The best decision I ever made was joining Women in Transport as a member when I was, at the time, I was an engineer in a consultancy, an engineering consultancy. That was back in 2008. And then I invested time in volunteering for them, and that helped me build skills and confidence to take my career in a different direction and actually build skills that led me into other careers that I wasn't expecting. So, find your tribe, find what works for you, and do what is right for you in that given moment, given your circumstances, but really invest the time and the effort into your own professional and personal development, because nobody else can do it for you. That's what I would say. I
really love that. Find your tribe. I might have to borrow that. That's very good. Thank you. Charly?
Yeah, I think the other thing I say is spend time reflecting on what you're already good at, your skills you already have. We work with amazing women, and many of whom come to us and think they don't have anything to offer as a mentor. They haven't done enough. They don't know enough. And so part of our training, we talk about this and how that can add value to other people. I sometimes ask people in a room to stand up and say, I am good at, and then finish the sentence with no caveat, with no, I guess I'm kind of, or my friends think I'm good at, or kind of a jokey answer. Actually, I am good at this. I had an amazing woman speak the other day. She works at Google and does lots of AI and is a consultant for NASA, absolutely spectacular. And she was talking about her imposter syndrome. And as part of the work she's at Google, they started running these I Am Remarkable clubs. And it's the same principle. You get together with a group of people and you practice regularly saying, I am remarkable because. And she said, one of the important things to remember is if it's fact, it's not bragging. It's fact, it's not bragging, it's true. And so that was really helpful, I thought. And I think actually sometimes just spending time to do that and allowing ourselves to do that is really important as well.
We're getting some wonderful little nuggets here, aren't we? Follow your tribe. I am remarkable because. I love that. So if you think about the journey we've been on now, we've looked at leadership programs within organisations, and I think we're generally saying a thumbs up. They're quite crucial to women's development. We're saying that mentors are important, as are sponsors, and sponsors are usually those that are within the organisation who, I think it was Alexandra who said, who speak well of you when you're not in the room and put you in position for promotion. We've talked a little bit about how you can help yourself along that journey by your own personal development. But we've still got this issue again, it's a lived experience for me. We still have this issue of attracting a diverse workforce into organisations, particularly those male-dominated environments. They are just not getting the number of candidates going through. So what advice would you give to employers on how they really can appeal to that wider catchment area, how they can make women feel comfortable about applying for those jobs? Is there something about the language that they use? Again, it's quite a wide question, but if we're going to shift the dial, and if we're going to move away from just recognising women that are on boards and start to look at that earlier talent, what would your advice be to organisations that are considering that right now? Sonya, I feel as if I've picked on you today, Sonya.
No, not at all. So I think there's no one-size-fits-all solution to that issue, and I think that organisations have to recognise that it's not also a tick box exercise. So you can't just do one intervention and think, oh, we've done it, or we've got one person in a key role and we've met our 20% and therefore that's done, because it doesn't look at the succession plan. But I think it's looking at the entire journey of your workforce, and that's, you know, going right back to how you're attracting younger people and looking at things, you know, things like the Girls Network is doing, and nurturing that talent through what is going to be your future talent pool, looking at the language, the imagery, the job description, the detail of the job descriptions and what you're actually asking for. Are you asking for people's desirable things? Actually, are the things that you're saying are essential or necessary? Are they really essential or necessary, or can you train people once they're in the job? Is it really the qualities, and do they need the qualifications, or do they just need the qualities that you need and the competencies? And how can you test for that in a different way? You know, there are lots of tools like, you know, blind CVs and so on and so forth to remove the unconscious bias in the processes and the systems that we have, and not just having policies, but having processes that are truly inclusive. And then training comes into this, in making sure that the people that are interviewing are trained, the people that are assessing, and the people that are, you know, running all your HR processes are trained. But also having really good induction as well, really good induction, progression, transparency, and pay scales. All of those things matter. It's not, you know, you get your graduates, you make sure they're really armed and catered for, and then you forget about them in the middle bit of their career, and then, as you say, people feel like they're forgotten, and especially women, they get to a midpoint in their career and suddenly they've hit a ceiling and they haven't got anywhere to go. So it's looking at every single touch point through the career trajectory of individuals in your company, and really putting diversity and inclusion at every single bit of it, not just as a policy that sits outside of everything else.
I mean, just picking up on a couple of your points there, I think, you know, all of those touch points are important, but I think that very first one, before you even, you know, before you're actually marketing to people before they even apply for a job, in my humble opinion. And I think your other point about touching each and every step of the way is, I think lots of organisations focus very heavily on being fair and being robust and treating everybody the same. But actually, is it about that, or is it more about equity, you know, having an equitable delivery? Because this isn't the best example I can use, but it's the only one I can think of. If you give everybody a right-handed pair of scissors, how fair is that on the person who's left-handed? So it's looking at it from a feels fair lens. It's all of those things at every single stage, isn't it? Alexandra, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, what Sonya said is absolutely on point, and is the way we would advise companies to proceed. What I would just add to that is that in terms of the decision making of the hiring manager, it's incredibly important that they are actually properly trained. So obviously, along the way from attraction up until onboarding, it's important that the whole process is inclusive. And in terms of their tools and their ideas, and there's best practice at each and every step of the way as well. In terms of the also kind of like networks that people tap into to get talent. A lot of people will tell you, well, there's no diverse talent in engineering. It's like, well, if you're always going to the same source, you're never going to find a different result. So it's about tapping into networks, and about actually also reaching out, companies reaching out to universities, and really working with them, and not just the top universities, but actually all universities, and actually creating connections with the networks there as well, the women's networks, etc. So it's really, really important that we look beyond your traditional pools of talent, really.
Very good point. Charly, you work with the youngsters a lot. So what advice would you give to employers about how early they should be targeting children, really, to understand what the opportunities are in the big wide world for them?
I mean, that's a really good question, which I'm not sure I have the answer as to how early. I think people's expectations about what they can do start in the first years of their life. And that's perhaps a little early to be planning exactly what your career is going to be straight away. But I think for us, so we start at 14, and that for me feels early enough for young people to be thinking about their futures, yet not having made decisions that might close doors. That's partly why we start working at that age. And what we see are that the key things, one is about the girls being able to see themselves in those environments, and the other is around accessibility. So in terms of being able to see themselves in those environments, they need to see women they can relate to in those environments, so they can begin to picture that themselves. There's some research that I believe Ofsted did a few years ago looking at girls' expectations and their aspirations, and they found some of the key things that change the way girls view themselves and their futures, and I think this is probably true actually for all young people, are one-on-one conversations with professionals, mentoring experiences, and experiences within the workplace. And to my mind, those are things that require you to engage on an emotional level, so you will have a response to it, and then you can begin to picture yourself doing that. You can begin to understand what that really looks like. So I think that's really important. And then accessibility and understanding the ways in which the recruitment and application process isn't accessible. And sometimes that requires speaking to people that aren't applying, or maybe have started and didn't finish, and understanding why. For some of our girls, we have conversations about the fact that actually it's a very, very wordy application, and they never had to do that before. Or perhaps actually on the day, I can't remember what they're called, the interview, like the group interview day where everyone goes there together. Actually, it requires a style or a level of communication, or kind of rules of the game that they've never been taught. There's certain ways you have small talk, there's certain ways you dress, actually aren't going to make you any less good ultimately at the job, but if you don't know the rules of the game, it's really hard to play it. So I think it's understanding what are those different barriers that you might not expect, and dealing with them early on as well.
Thank you. I get the understanding the rules of the game, and I think where my question was coming from as well is oftentimes, particularly in areas where you are required to have a certain qualification, we've actually experienced that by the time the company is looking to engage these youngsters, they've already taken exams that do not suit the environment that they want to go into, and had they have gone in a lot earlier and shared with young pupils, on a touch and feel basis, they might have made different decisions. I'm conscious of time now, and I think we've had some great debate. I think there's oodles of questions coming through, and we're probably not going to be able to get through them all. But just looking at the ones that have been most popular so far, lots and lots of questions around the training of mentors, whether that be straight mentors, reverse mentoring, or whatever. So could we have some specific advice to people on what training we feel is appropriate and how we go about that? Training specifically, who would be the best person to answer that? Alexandra, do you want to pick that
Sure.
one?
So training for women, do you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
This
So
is
sorry?
mentorship training. Training to be a mentor. Yeah.
Mentorship training. So absolutely. Well, as part of the mentoring program that we run at Involve, we offer workshops to actually train mentors and share best practice on how to have a successful mentorship partnership. But however, what I would say is that usually what we would advocate is for the mentee to drive the relationship. So the mentor, it's incredibly important, obviously, that they know what how to guide someone, of course. And so in this instance, if they don't have perhaps access to a workshop, what you can do is actually ask some senior leaders that you may know about some best practice, some tips, or even online. A lot of people are very open on LinkedIn or social media to actually share their own best practice. But in a mentoring partnership, it's essential that the mentee actually drives it and takes ownership for it.
Do you think that's because they have to build the rapport with the person? Is that largely where that's coming from? Yeah, because if they don't get on and you've got a formal process, it's kind of not going to work, is it really? Sonya, just a very quick one for you. A question about your speed networking that you did in rail. I don't think that's as popular as some of the other varieties around. What are the benefits? How is it measured?
So the speed mentoring, it was actually TfL's mentoring. So I'm not sure how, I can't say how it was, the benefits were measured because it wasn't my program, but in terms of, I think in terms of the benefits, at least anecdotally from feedback I received, it was an opportunity for people to meet senior leaders within the organisation and external people who they wouldn't normally meet, and to get an external view and a different view from what they would get day to day. It might be they get informal mentoring through their line manager and their directorate, but they get to meet somebody else and have a different view and get a few different views from different people and ask questions that they might not necessarily feel comfortable asking people that they would see in their normal day-to-day lives. So that's what I would say. And in terms of how it actually worked, it was literally just, there were a set of themed questions, some tables. This was a face-to-face, but you could do it with breakout rooms, and you have one person, 3 or 4 people who are the mentees, and they ask their questions, and then you rotate every 15 minutes.
Thank you. Hopefully that answers that question. I think there's another, there's a group of questions here. So if it doesn't sound like yours, it's because I am putting it all together. But there's quite a few people asking, when you've articulated your lived experience and you have got an issue or a barrier, and you're presenting that to someone who either minimises it or, just doesn't understand, thinks you're being a woman, basically. How do you deal with that? What's the best way to either to have that male understand or to get through and succeed with whatever it is that you're trying to do? Do you have any advice for people around that? Oh, sorry, Charly?
I think it's really difficult, to be honest. My suggest for you or with you is, I guess this is a place also which sort of organisation-wide training is useful, to encourage people within the organisation to listen to the lived experience and to value it and to understand its importance. Sometimes perhaps it's about thinking what are the things
Charly, had you finished? I'm ever so sorry, I lost signal. I'm not sure whether it's me or if everybody can hear.
It was actually coming from Charly.
I think I'm up there as well, Carmen, sorry.
So Oh, okay. So I didn't catch, I'm really sorry, I didn't catch any of the key points there because the signal kept going in and out. Had I have realised it was you, I might have stopped you to do, but anyway, as I say, you never get through these unless you have some technical issues, do you? Sonya, is there anything that you can add to that to sort of give women some comfort that it's worthwhile trying to address these issues? Because it's so common, isn't it? And yet we just don't seem to be being able to solve the problem. This is why people leave and go to other jobs, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, it is. As Charlie was saying, you know, it is very difficult if you know, you don't feel listened to or heard in your own organisation. I would say if you're able to find somebody who you do feel comfortable in your organisation talking to and raise it with them. And you know, if there is a way for you at all, or for a way for somebody senior within the organisation that has a position to influence those conversations, and as Charlie was mentioning, you know, maybe ensure there's training organisation wide to ensure that everybody is able and is open to listening to those experiences. I would reiterate the point about network, finding a network for you. If you really can't find a way through in your organisation, finding a peer group or a network that you do feel comfortable in and that can support you and that you can feel heard in is really important, and find somewhere that really is a safe space for yourself.
Sonya, that's a really important question that's come up that links to exactly to your point. Mm-hmm. And the question is, are there any forums or groups where women can go to seek advice for really gritty issues when they've, you know, come up against a blank in their workplace? The issues that they're mentioning in particular are things like sexual harassment, maternity, discrimination, hostility, all the things that we do hear goes on, sadly. So if you can't get anywhere in your organisation, if you can't find a trusted person within the company that you can share it with, where would any of you think is the best place for people to go when, I'm guessing by that time they're ripping their hair out? Where would you advise them to go? Start with you, Sonya, to finish up on your earlier point.
Yeah, so I think that there are a number of organisations that deal with those sort of gritty issues, so that are campaigning around these areas. So places like Pregnant Then Screwed, which is a campaign that looks specifically around maternity issues. They have really active Instagram and community pages that you can look at. And there's you know, like organisations like Women in Transport, and there's various women's networks within specific modes and areas, STEM ambassadors, WES. I could go on. Obviously, yes. The Girls Network in Charles for younger audiences. So there's lots of different networks. There isn't one joined up. And then there are things like citizens' advice if you've got general issues and you want free and partial advice around a specific issue. But I'm sure Alexandra or Charlie will have other organisations.
Alexandra, should we come to you because you've been quiet for a little while? It's my turn to pick on you now.
Sure. What I would say is that usually, I mean, hopefully most organizations will have a HR department or person that is actually the go-to when we have these type of these issues, really. If you don't, then that's definitely obviously very problematic. And Sonya mentioned in terms of the networks, you can find support networks that are, of course, in your own sectors and industries, but there are also other organizations for women's rights and beyond that are kind of like the next level type of organizations who can also support and share advice.
Thank you. Charlie? Anything you want to add? Or
not much to add. I mean, we've tried to pull a service directory for our girls together because there isn't one place to go. And I think that's actually a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think it's been a really, really useful debate. I feel as if we've covered the majority of the questions. As I say, there were questions coming in, but I've kind of grouped them together. Do we feel that we have, between us as a group, addressed enough about those that are seriously marginalised? I mean, is there anything else at all that we should be covering to help them specifically? Because the reason I'm asking that question is, if you look at the data, and particularly if you look at the latest ONS figures, you know, for whatever reason, it is women. And if those women happen to be from a Black, Asian or ethnic minority background, they seem to have been harder hit. I'm not saying they've been picked on, but the numbers seem to indicate they've been harder hit. So I'm just wondering if there's anything at all that we could throw into the mix that might add additional support for them. If there isn't, that's fine, you know. No.
Sorry, I thought Charly was going to speak.
I think some of it's just acknowledging that that's true and that's the case.
Sorry, go ahead, Charly.
Sorry. My point there. I think some of it is just acknowledging it is the case. And to my point earlier, not blaming the people that are suffering from it, acknowledging that them has a problem, and actually it has been those demographics that have been hardest hit. We've seen through COVID, women and young people have really suffered the most. We know the gap is widening. And young people have been remarkable through the crisis, really resilient, really entrepreneurial, and really positive in spite of it all, but it has hit them hardest. And I think we have to not shy away from that, because if we don't acknowledge it, we won't start to address it. But I think there are systemic and structural.
The only thing that I would say is I think we've got structural changes that are needed going forward anyway, because if you think there's about 97 million new jobs to be created worldwide, I'm not quite sure of the millions how many we've got, but it's going to be a large chunk of it. And they're all in, you know, different areas, you know, AI, care. Well, actually, I think every recruitment sphere is going to suffer skill shortages. So there's 1 billion people to be trained, upskilled, retrained, whichever way you want to put it. But that's a bit further down the line, because that's through 2025, 2030. But actually, absolute fact, the problem's here and now. There are not enough skilled people to do the jobs that are available. So I think there's a real demand for you know, training and people to develop themselves. So my only advice to marginalised people who are struggling is absolutely don't give up, because there are plenty of organisations out there that will want you. So if your own industry is not, you know, coming up to the plate for you, consider retraining. What was your saying, Sonya? Something about the tribe. I've got
Find your tribe.
Yes, find your tribe. And if the one that you're in isn't the right one, go and find another one, because there's absolutely plenty of opportunities around. And there are organisations that we speak to the whole time that are desperate to improve their diversity and inclusion for the right reasons, not for ticking numbers. They genuinely want people in. So particularly STEM, our organisation won an award because we moved scientific and technician recruitment from, I think it was 2% to 50%. And you know what? Sometimes we talk about these big things, and often it can be the little things, you know, the language, the appeal factor to people, not, you know, gender decoding, all of those kind of things all play a part in how you put people and organisations together. Now, on the basis that Sally has joined us, that gives me a flag that we're about to move on. So I just wanted to say, from me, a personal thank you from me for being a great panel. Thank you so much. You've made it very easy for me. And I'll now hand you over to Sally.
Thank you, Carmen.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much, Carmen. Thank you to all of you. Thank you. That was great. I got completely lost listening to you and then thought, oh my God, I've got to get back on there. So thank you. And thanks everyone for coming in, for listening and contributing. Absolutely brilliant things for us to take away here. I did just want to mention this pledge we talked about at the beginning. Stuart, if you could share that screen. As I said, we're asking people to just do something differently after something they've heard today. I mean, I definitely think the whole find your tribe thing is going to stick with us all. But if you could just have a look at this, if there is something that you've been inspired by, that you're going to find out more about or do something about, please do let us know what it is. We'll be following up with you afterwards. And that's it. So thank you very much and have a good rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye.